to the squatters, and if he'd failed, we now know a squad of Marines were waiting in the wings. Chris Fay's meeting was not going well.
We believe he was confronted by his continental colleagues, the Dutch and the other board members in The Hague, who said that Shell UK was going to have to change its position, that it was unacceptable, that the public opinion was so strong, that top political figures had opposed the idea, and literally ordered him to go back and call a halt to the whole operation only hours before it was all due to be carried out.
On June the 20th, Shell UK announced the reversal of their decision to dispose of the Brent Spar oil rig at sea, after an intense public campaign by Greenpeace, both internationally and at home. Part of Greenpeace's case was that when they'd occupied the platform, they took samples from its storage tanks that showed it contained 5,500 tonnes of oil. But yesterday, Greenpeace's executive director in the UK, Peter Melchett, admitted in a letter to Chris Fay, Shell UK's chief executive, that Greenpeace were wrong. He concluded the letter by saying, "I would be grateful if you could convey my apologies to your colleagues."
Already, Shell seem to have learnt a lesson from the mauling they took from German public opinion. We've now discovered that Shell and the other oil companies are hiring a specialist PR firm to help keep all options open, including deep-sea dumping. Its task is to create a climate of political and public opinion which permits such decisions to be implemented without a public backlash.
In 1978, the Chinese people were told by their party that the Stalinist principles of state ownership and centralized planning were being abandoned. Their closed economy was to be reformed and opened to the outside world. Since then, the economy of the whole country has been growing overall at an average rate of 9% a year. Next year, the economy will be 4 times bigger than it was in 1978 when the open door policy was agreed. If the current rate of growth continues, it will have grown 8 times by the year 2002. China will soon have matched the early growth rates of Taiwan, Japan and South Korea, and is already on course to becoming the biggest economy in the world.
Welcome to the opening ceremonies of the Games of the 23rd Olympiad at Los Angeles.
Kodak's sheer size and inertia earned it the nickname Big Yellow Elephant during the early 80s. It appeared impotent in the face of Fuji's increasing success in the US and Europe. Matters came to a head when Kodak lost the sponsorship of the 1984 Olympics to Fuji. Worse still, this was Los Angeles, Kodak's home territory. The Fuji threat was high profile indeed. Kodak was seriously in need of a new strategy to tackle the Japanese onslaught. Dr. Al-Sidi, the senior strategist at the company's American headquarters, came up with a master plan. They would hit back directly at Fuji's domestic market. The strategy was to shift the battleground back to Japan. As a reward for his big idea, Sieg was to become Kodak's new general manager based in Tokyo.
Well, in Japan, clearly Fuji had gained a substantial grip on the market for a number of different reasons, not only because they had become a strong competitor, which they are, but because of what I call protectionist hangover. The Japanese market was well protected to protect the domestic recovery.
Most of Japan's population of more than 120 million people take photographs. Between them, they snap nearly 7 billion a year. Dr. Sieg realized that the key to winning more Japanese customers was to win more Japanese retail outlets. The Yodobashi camera store in downtown Tokyo claims to be the largest photo shop in Japan. Kodak's two Japanese rivals are prominent, the blue boxes of Konica and the green boxes of Fuji. Until the early 80s, Kodak's products were marketed by Japanese distributors. Kodak had just 25 people in Tokyo running the machine on idle.
Through that long period of not being in the market directly, we really had lost contact with the target audience or the target market for our products.
Kodak's main distributor had been a large company based in Osaka called Nagase Sangyo. Kodak wrenched control back from Nagase, leaving it as a minority shareholder in a new distribution company owned by Kodak. Kodak opened hundreds of its own shops. These high-street processing labs showed the Japanese people Kodak's commitment to service. It's essential here. But they also encouraged customers to buy more film when they got their pictures developed. And of course, Kodak hoped that its film would become the preferred choice. The American-owned company is conscious that to stay here long-term, it must think and act like a Japanese company. And that means not only in staffing, but also in its links with the business community. The company opened this research and development center outside Tokyo, staffed by many graduates from Japanese universities.
The point is that by being here in Japan, our staff participates in a number of technical activities. And as part of the organizing committees for these activities, we're thrown into contact with colleagues from Fuji, colleagues from Sony, on a casual basis after the meetings, drinking beer. And you sort of get a feel for the directions they're going from those kind of interactions.
3 years ago, Kodak bought a 14% equity stake in Chinon cameras. It's not the only Japanese company that Kodak has invested in. There are many others, some of which may not show Kodak a return on their investment for many years to come. This is a further demonstration of long-term commitment. Kodak is now the single largest shareholder in Chinon Industries. But that relationship hasn't stopped Mr. Chino being critical of his partner, apparently agreeing with the nickname Big Yellow Elephant. He believes Kodak should have entered the domestic video market, making camcorders, and he says it was offered the opportunity.
それはね、やっぱりね、一番最初カムコーダーをね、やったでしょ。8ミリやりましたね。失敗しましたね。そう怯えてね、もう完全に手を出さなくなっちゃったんです。で、私はだから一回失敗をしたから、もう一回やるべきだと。
But for the moment, Chinon makes a standard 35mm camera under the Kodak label. It also makes printers for Kodak which attach to laptop computers. It may seem a strange move for Kodak, but the company has now realized, perhaps belatedly, that the distinction between photography and electronics is becoming blurred, and this is nowhere more true than in Japan. The decision not to enter the home video market may yet be one that Kodak will regret. The picture market, both moving and still, is now becoming electronic. This camera takes still pictures, but it's all electronic. You can use it just like a conventional film camera, but the picture is ready instantly for you to view on your TV set at home. And it's stored not on a film, but on a little magnetic computer disc. This one is made by Canon. Kodak has refused to be drawn into direct conflict with the video still camera makers. Instead, it's about to launch a product which combines film with an electronic system called photo CD. After conventional processing, the pictures from a 35mm film will be put on a new gold compact disc, which is played in a special machine. Kodak says the system gives a much higher definition image than the still video cameras.
Kodak, for most of the 20th century, enjoyed essentially a monopoly position. And during the late 70s and 80s, it was faced with a difficult challenge of working itself out of that rather pleasant position and into world competition. At the same time, they're faced with a technological substitution from electronic imaging, which represents a real challenge for a company that has its basic skills in chemistry.
Harley-Davidson is one company that's realized the value of learning organization theory. Once they were nearly bankrupt. Now the company has a turnover of more than $1 billion. But sometime during the late 1970s, things went wrong. The company was losing money.
We were awash in leaky motorcycles, motorcycles that didn't function nearly as well as they should have functioned, and we clearly understood the need for quality and reliability improvement and set about doing just that.
Harley-Davidson failed to recognize the growing threat of Japanese competition until almost too late. It called for drastic measures. To raise the cash meant cutting overheads quickly. At the time, Harley-Davidson employed 4,000 people. 40% of them were laid off. It's difficult to imagine now that in the early 80s, Harley-Davidson was a byword for bad engineering.
You find a mistake, and they would just like, get it to the line, get it to the line. If it would fit, get it to the line. That's all they wanted was the line moving. If the line went down, why? It was somebody's neck. They would fire them. When the new owners took over, they immediately put in quality controls.
The company introduced Japanese quality methods. They only succeeded in solving part of the problem.
We found in the mid-'80s they weren't as effective as what we needed to be for the long term. And in fact, during the mid-'80s, we entered a period of complacency, you might say, in terms of product quality and even in the employee attitude for continuous improvement. Fortunately for Harley-Davidson, many of the customers are employees. Many of our employees are very valuable customers. As a result, the culture that exists within Harley-Davidson is very much one of freedom, independence, dedication to the product. Where else would you find a company whose employees has the name of the product tattooed at some portion of their anatomy?
Harley-Davidson is now helping its employees prepare for a changing future.
Can you show me how to spell check? Okay, spell check, you go up to tools.
The company set up a training center. Staff take courses both inside and outside the company and are fully funded.
Okay, it says it's complete, so you had nothing spelled wrong. Just click on OK, and then you can continue on, okay?
In the past, Harley-Davidson didn't need highly qualified employees.
Is one of the denominators, could one of the denominators be?
Now it must pay the price of an outdated recruitment policy. Even confidential coaching must be given on reading, writing, and arithmetic.
So at this point, they went ahead and added the 9 and the 4 and got the 13 15ths. Make sense?
Makes sense.
The company had a long-term problem. Harley's motorbikes are built in York, Pennsylvania, but the engines are made in Milwaukee, nearly 1,000 miles away.
We had made a tentative decision to pull that assembly line out of our York operation and move it into the Milwaukee area. unfortunately, we hadn't really stopped to think of some of the unintended consequences of that sort of a move. And the key leverage point, which was, for that particular decision, long-term relationships with the union.
At the 11th hour, they decided to keep the line in York open and put up with the extra shipping costs.
It has turned out to be an excellent decision in that it improved labor relations with today's knowledge of how well things have worked out, that the total cost of production was actually lowered.
Harley-Davidson has survived nearly 100 years. If it is to continue, like others, it must be open to changing its business. The company is already doing so. It no longer just sells bikes. It sells dreams.
I think Harley was one of the first corporations that really became involved in a very strategic program. And today we're the largest corporate licensing program in the world, so I think that speaks for itself and how well we've done and how carefully we've done it. We sold nearly 100,000 motorcycles last year, and we sold 400,000 Franklin Mint models in less than 2 years. So we're selling hundreds and hundreds of thousands of toys and adult collectibles and T-shirts. I think we're selling something like 5 million T-shirts around the world.
Licensing its brand is worth $500 million, of which Harley-Davidson gets a royalty.
In 1989, Bob Wales and Brian Cowie were made redundant.
Whene'er to drink you're inclined, or gutty sacks run in your mind.
A year later, they'd raised £500,000 and bought the business for themselves. What they got for their money was a mothballed brewery down on the docks in Ipswich, home of the once great Tolly Cobbled Brewing Company. Now the two men are struggling to bring Tolly Cobbled back to life. But with the brewing industry in upheaval, can their fragile business, with its proud heritage, weather the storms ahead and survive long enough to start making real money?
Thank you very much. Beautifully drawn. Cheers. I've been associated with the brewing business for many years, and I've had a keen interest in beer for even longer than that. But the brewing business is undergoing tremendous changes. It's a very, very tough world out there at the present moment. Bob and Brian, who just bought out Tolly Cobbled, have produced a management plan which I've read. On paper, everything looks pretty good. But for them to survive, they really have got to get everything right.
The company now consists of two parts. The brewery, which is producing a small range of traditionally brewed cask ales, and a drinks distribution business which came with the buyout.
I really feel well briefed for this visit. I've seen the papers that raised the money for the buyout, but they do seem to be trying to do an awful lot of things at once. They've got to establish the beer in the market, run the distribution business, and in addition they've got this ambitious scheme to turn the brewery into a working brewery museum.
This is going to be the pub, the brewery tap, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Once the pub is completed, people will go from the pub through the wall into the brewery from a different direction. So
Bob and Brian are obviously totally in love with their idea of keeping this thing going and their dream of turning it into a working museum. But I need to see how realistic these ideas are. So I'm going to have a look around with the head brewer, Chris Gregson.
Did you always intend to be a brewer?
Well, it's something I've always fancied doing. It's an interesting challenge.
Well, let's see the bar.
Yeah, right, well, I'll lead on. We'll go to the top of the room.
Gosh, this is a real comparison between the old and the new.
It's the most incredible hodgepodge of old and new equipment.
See the conveyor going around in there.
There's the most tremendous waste of capacity here. They've got one contract with Brent Walker to supply 20,000 barrels a year. And this place must be able to churn out 5 times that amount.
Oh, this is Owen. Owen is about to
Hello,
put the hops
Owen,
in.
glad to meet you.
Yep.
How long have you been with Tolly Cobbold?
40 odd years.
40 years?
So, if you want to turn the steam off and open the door up, we'll get the hops in.
Are you actually running, I mean, you are running massively under capacity at the moment, aren't you?
Yep, certainly. And we think we can probably go up to about 80,000 barrels output without having to go on shift and without having to recruit any more people.
So how many days a week are you brewing at the moment?
Well, to achieve the 20,000 barrels, we're brewing 2 days a week. So when the folks aren't brewing, they're involved in packaging, and then when they're not packaging, they're involved in painting and decorating the brewery. So
yes, on the other hand, I mean, really, the margin ought to come out of the brewing itself.
What's so frustrating about all this unused capacity is that every barrel that they can make over 20,000 a year is almost sheer profit. So there's a real opportunity for them to make some decent money. At the moment, what's keeping the company afloat is a distribution business, which on the face of it seems less risky. I need to find out how secure it is and just how far it can actually go. So I'm going to have a look around with the manager, John Artis.
This is our empties yard. As you can see, where all the empties that are returned.
Well, somebody's drinking and you must be selling something or distributing something.
That's right. Would you like to look at the warehouse?
I would very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now look, John, what makes the difference? Why do you believe you can run a more efficient distribution company than the breweries themselves? What's the magic secret?
Well, I think first of all, we have very good employees who work hard and prepared to be flexible.
Yeah.
And everyone is keen to see it work.
And does that work the whole way up? I mean, because one of the things that is a bit extraordinary about your company is the fact you've got 2 equal managing directors. Now, normally, that's a recipe for bloody disaster.
No, I think it works very well.
And can you still hold the thing together the way you're doing it at the moment if you grow a lot bigger? I mean, how big do you think this distribution business could be? Could it be double the size it is now?
I think it will be within a few months.
And
certainly
is that the limit?
No, I don't think so.
I'm really impressed with this. John's got an absolutely clear strategy and he's done a lot of clever things. He's concentrating on the most profitable areas and getting a lot of bang for the bucks. I've come to Burton-on-Trent, the home of British brewing. I want to try and find out what Tolly's chances are of getting contracts to brew beers for other people to increase the throughput in their own brewery. I'm going to meet Don Marshall of Allied Breweries, one of the largest brewing groups in the country. They sell Tolly beer in their pubs and incidentally also run brewery tours.
You must put a few bob into this, I should think.
We produce in this brewery just over 2 million barrels.
Ooh, that gives some idea of scale. Tolly, who I'm trying to help, of course, are only in at 80,000. Well, that's their capacity.
That's right.
And they're actually only in at 20,000. Plainly, they've got to try and get from 20,000 up to 80,000.
Yes.
And they can only really hope to do that fast by doing some sort of contract brewing. What are the chances of that and what are the problems?
Well, we do have a problem in the industry because we have overcapacity.
Everywhere, yes.
That's right. So it's a bit difficult sometimes to persuade somebody to give up beers which they're already brewing.
Yes.
And if somebody was to offer them contract brewing, that's just likely to be a brand which might not be doing very well.
Yeah.
So their long-term opportunities aren't as good.
But do they have, I mean, it seems to me the way that pubs are shaking out at the present, they might have the opportunity of producing own brand beers for small groups of pubs.
I think that's a first-class idea, yes.
And that is a chance.
Yes, I do.
One of the things that the Tolly boys are thinking of is doing brewery tours. How do you see that? Because you run brewery tours, don't you?
Yes, we do. We have something like 18,000 visitors go through this brewery every year. Quite frankly, we don't make any money out of it. We probably have to subsidise quite a lot. Now, I think that if they want to have brewery tours, it's got to be part of an overall marketing package.
I'm clear now what I need to advise Bob and Brown. Hello, you two.
Good morning.
When some things don't change, it's always bloody windy at Shotley, isn't
That's
it?
quite right.
Well, let's go on down.
Yes.
Is this another of your ventures? The most secure of those three businesses, without question, is the distribution business. And if, God forbid, if the other two businesses don't work out the way you hope, you've still got the distribution business, provided you haven't screwed it up in the meantime. And my fear is, because it's not as sexy as the other businesses, and it isn't actually what you bought out in order to do, that it may not have the priority in your own thinking that I'm convinced it must do.
I think in some sense it has, because we understand that distribution, we have a real competitive advantage.
Yeah. The second area is brewing. Every damn keg you can get out of there until you're up at the 80,000 is profit. You're not going to, in my view, get there fast enough the way you're going at the present moment.
Right.
There are a number of chains of pubs being set up by people who are buying. I think the more you could brew special brews for them.
I think for some of them it's still a bit early days for them to consider that.
I buy that, but that means really you've got to try and push them even harder, of course, because for you it's critical. Now, the leisure business, I must say, the more I talk about this, the more I think this is pretty high risk. I haven't found so far anybody who really makes money out of this.
I think we'd seen very much the brewery as opening up as a tourist attraction, as the means by which we, if you like, sell our beer as well. Now, almost if we could do that with making, almost if you like, a smallish profit.
The difficulty, if I may say so with the two of you, is you are very much in love with your dream. You've taken a hell of a risk. You set this up with a particular picture of how you're going to do it. The danger then is that you stay with something longer than the actual facts justify. And people who are too much in love with their business are always at high risk.
Now let's meet some regular users of BBC Learning Zone.
My name is Reza Tahiri. Last year we opened this shop called Persis between Oxford Circus and Hanover Square. It's been great success, I think. One day I wake up very early, so I sat in front of the telly, started flipping between the channels. I found by accident the Learning Zone, and I'm fascinated by the program. The things I like about the Learning Zone is the wide variety of subjects they've got and the plain English language they use. We wanted to expand the shop, we had to raise some funds. And one day when I was watching the small business program on the Learning Zone, I realized we can apply for a grant from the DTI. We applied and now it's been a great success. I couldn't do it without the Learning Zone.
My name is Stephen Edson and I'm a training officer. I deliver training to people who work here at the Port of Felixstowe. I've used the Learning Zone for my own National Vocational Qualification in Management, but also for actually teaching other people to learn as well. I record the Learning Zone and keep the tapes in a pile, so I can actually refer back to a situation if it occurs at work, and then I know how to deal with it. I've actually used the 20 Steps to Better Management series, and it includes crisis management. It's such a fast industry, and things can go wrong. I found the Learning Zone to be really useful. It's so practical and it's very relevant to today's workforce.
I'm Anna Guimarães and I'm Head of Media Studies here at Amersham and Wickham College. We teach radio production, video production, desktop publishing, journalism and photography. We take the Learning Zone programmes ourselves. We then take them into the classroom and we let them watch the whole thing and then we'll have a discussion. Using television makes it a little bit more interesting. It's faster, television just makes it much more immediate and much more fun. The Learning Zone is a very useful resource for me as a teacher. They give you lots of clips of material that as tutors we don't necessarily have easy access to. The art and craft of movie making, which was absolutely outstanding for students. They really accessed it because it showed them how to make films. Also the different jobs that were available in the film industry and in television. Brilliant.
Seven nights a week, expand your horizons with BBC Learning Zone. Well, this week at 4 a.m, a chance to see the first few programmes from 4 language series for beginners, starting with the French experience. The series will be shown in full from early November. It covers all the basics and is filmed in different regions of France, offering an insight into the way of life and the language.
La France, c'est la plus haute montagne d'Europe, le Mont Blanc. C'est aussi plus de 18% des voitures en circulation en Europe. La France, c'est 73 litres de vin et plus de 5 paires de chaussures par an et par personne. La France, c'est le pays où on se marie le moins en Europe. La France, c'est le pays qui consacre près de 1% de son budget à la culture. Et pour vous, c'est quoi la France?
La France, c'est quoi pour vous?
La France, c'est quoi? La bonne question.
Douce France, cher pays de mon enfance.
Pour vous, la France, c'est quoi?
C'est un beau pays.
C'est une multitude de paysages qui changent tous les 100 km.
C'est un pays dont on ne peut pas se lasser.
On est baigné par un océan, par une mer. On est béni des dieux, quoi.
C'est ma patrie. La France, c'est Paris, et Paris, c'est la rencontre avec tous les autres qui ne sont ni de mon pays, ni de la France.
C'est la culture, la multiculture.
C'est un beau musée, et après un bon repas. Mais c'est superbe. Et un peu de soleil par-dessus, c'est ça la France.
Savoir dire. Le premier contact. Comment allez-vous? Ça va? Ça va, merci.
Bonjour, comment allez-vous?
Ça va, merci, chez vous?
Ça va, merci.
Merci. Bonjour, Pierre Chavreau. Bonjour.
Madame Glace, bonjour.
Bonsoir.
Oui, attends ma poule. Bonjour, comment allez-vous?
Ça va, merci, chez vous?
Ça va, merci.
Merci.
Salut, ça va.
Je vous présente Bertrand, un ami.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
Allô, Frédéric? Salut, c'est Sonia. Ça va?
Ouais, ça va et toi?
Très bien, merci.
Ça va? Salut Martine.
On s'assoit avec vous alors, hein?
Salut Didier, comment ça va toi?
Et toi?
Alors, Marcel.
Bonjour Martine. Ça va?
Oui. Et
Je suis
vous?
bien content de vous voir.
Oh, moi
Ouais.
aussi, hein? C'est
Ouais,
toujours
ouais.
un plaisir. Hein.
Ouais,
Ça va
ouais.
bien? Bon.
Ça
Votre dame alors?
Info. La France est le pays le plus visité au monde, avec chaque année plus de 50 millions de visiteurs étrangers.
Savoir dire. Dire votre nationalité. Vous êtes français? Je suis français.
Vous êtes français?
Oui, je suis français.
Je suis anglaise.
Vous êtes française?
Non, je suis anglaise.
Vous êtes français?
Oui, je suis français.
Vous êtes française?
Non, je suis algérienne.
Vous êtes française?
Non.
De quelle nationalité êtes-vous?
Espagnole.
Vous êtes français?
Je suis français.
Tu es française?
Oui, je suis française.
Vous êtes française?
Non, je suis anglaise.
Vous êtes française?
Non, Brésil.
Vous êtes brésilienne?
Brésilienne.
Vous êtes français?
Oui, bien sûr.
Rencontre. Le 14 juillet. Le 14 juillet, la France se rassemble. C'est en effet la fête nationale. Le défilé militaire commémore la Révolution. La prise de la Bastille, célèbre prison en 1789. Triomphe du peuple sur la monarchie. Mais aujourd'hui, quel est pour les Français le symbole du 14 juillet?
C'est la Révolution 1789. Donc démocratie, liberté, égalité.
Je pense que le 14 juillet, c'est un moment, une date où la France peut montrer sa fierté.
Il n'y a qu'un symbole, c'est le symbole de la liberté.
Alors, pour fêter la liberté, que font les Français?
On sort dans la rue, on communique avec les autres et on essaye de voir le défilé le matin et voilà, de faire la fête surtout.
On assiste au feu d'artifice, on va au bal.
Et le feu d'artifice surtout, je pense que ça, notre âme d'enfant, même les gens qui ne sont pas militaristes, tout le monde aime les feux d'artifice.
Ah, le 14 juillet ne serait pas le 14 juillet sans feu d'artifice.